From the Northwest to the Everglades, from the Southwest up to Maine. Even though he's seldom seen, everybody knows his name. Through the forests and the backwoods, folks are looking night and day, hoping for a chance to see old Bigfoot USA. Well, he's big, bad, and hairy, hangs out in the woods. No doubt he'd be scary in any neighborhood. He's the best there is at staying hid, but we're gonna find him anyway. Maybe then we can document old Bigfoot USA. He leaves tracks, scat, man, if that ain't evidence, how about hair? Banging on trees and midnight screams don't sound like no bear. Got an appetite, keeps him up all night, so he likes to chill all day. But he'll be around when the sun goes down. He's Bigfoot USA. Ain't no man ever been that fast. No man will ever be that strong. Ain't no way you're gonna whip his, so you might as well get along. He's got more names than anyone in any record book, they say. Right or wrong, they all belong to old Bigfoot USA. They call him Bigfoot, wild man, Sasquatch, stick man, cattle critter, woolly booger, mossy man, and flint man. Rush ape, skunk ape, night ape, swamp ape, grass man, wood man, gray man, and hairy man. Dog man, otter man, lizard man, raggedy man, wendigo, Seattle, Sonoqua, bush man. Wood devil, mountain devil, goat man, stone man, forest devil, big man, timber giant, brush man, ice giant, devil, monkey, boogie man, and cave monster, yellow top, skookum, and nook nook. Swamp monster, night screamer, evil seeker, catamount, Fort Worth monster, Minnesota Iceman. Stone coat, missing link, ape man, char man, big figure, stone giant, Missouri monster, elk monster, yay ho, Honey Island swamp monster, no head, no neck, tall man, Boggyville. Night people, stick, Indian, hairy, savage, owl woman, gamekeeper, sweater cat, bad smelling tree, hill monkey, man, beast, hairy monster, snake man.
Welcome to Bigfoot and Paranormal Encounters podcast. And now your host, Dave Weichert.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Bigfoot and Paranormal Encounters podcast. This is our first Saturday podcast, and I was originally going to change from Wednesday to Saturday, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to keep Wednesday and I'm going to keep Saturday. So we'll be doing 2 podcasts a week now. All right. I'm going to bring on my guest in a few minutes. His name is Robert and Solomon. I'm sorry. I got to wake up. All right. So let me go and bring Robert in. Robert.
Hello, Dave. Thank you for having me on.
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning.
Let me just fix something here. I'm on. Let's see here. Give me 1 second. There we go. Okay.
There it is.
All right. So how are you today, Robert?
Good. It's a nice warm day here in sunny Ohio, and we're just kind of getting out of whatever cold snap we've been having for the past 2 or 3 days. So it's
Yeah,
just
really.
been, you know, just
Yeah,
enjoying the weather. That's really about it right now.
it was pretty chilly last night, but a couple days ago, I'll tell you that smoke coming down from Canada in New York, that was really, really rough. It was orange looking out. It was very smoky, and I was out working on my carport, and I'll tell you, after I came in, I did not feel too well at all.
That's a topic for a whole other show.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So this morning we're going to be talking about you. Well, you're going to be talking about giants.
Yes, sir.
Where do you want to start? Do you want me to give you your first question, or
Yeah, go ahead. Let's
Okay.
launch right into it, shall we?
okay? All right. My first question is: let's talk about some of the famous giants.
So obviously, one that comes to mind, in my personal opinion, would definitely be the giant in the Bible himself, and that would be Goliath, the 8-9 foot giant that took on King David in the Book of Kings, and ended up losing to David. David, of course, put the rock in the slingshot and hit him right in the head, like literally right dead set on the forehead. But him, the Philistines, they were all giant people themselves. And the interesting aspect of it all is if we go even a little bit further back, if we're going back to the book of Genesis, and then we go back to the book of Enoch, we learn that the fallen ones or the fallen angels were also of a larger stature than most men, and that their intercourse with women led to what would be known as Nephilim or Nephilim, who were also giant like creatures or abominations, depending on how you really want to get into it. And if you were thinking of modern day giants, which we were talking before the show started about Andre the Giant, who was a famous professional wrestler in the WWF, he was a larger man too. But the difference being between him and the giants that I've been researching is that he wasn't a very mobile man. Yes, he wrestled. Yes, he did some pretty amazing feats of strength. He could drink many a beer himself. However, the giants of old, or the giants of legend, even dating back to the Native American times here in the US, we were very fast. They were very agile, strong, cunning, everything. The giants we have today, however, are more impeded by gravity. They're more impeded by their height. Their organs don't function the same. We had a very tall gentleman, I believe he said at 8-9 feet, many, many years ago before I was born, the world's tallest man. And he had to use a cane to get around, as to where a lot of your older giants, like your Goliaths, you got to figure an 8-9 foot man running in a battlefield fighting against Israelites. It would be no slouch. It'd be no, there'd be no man that would be on par with a man of that stature if we compared statures of man from then and men today. So something to take into account.
Okay. Let's see. What do I have for you? Who was the first recorded giant?
That's a tough one. I might be a little stumped here because the bones that a lot of people found on their properties uh, have ranged from the 8 to 9 foot in length. And you might have stumped me on this one because I could not tell you who the first recorded giant is, because the first recorded giant, they found bones, so many bones, but in terms of if we're talking people, I couldn't tell you. Now, if you have that answer, I'd love to know.
I don't. Well, let me throw this one at you.
Please.
Who is the tallest giant?
Oh, man. So from the records that I have been looking through in old newspaper articles, a lot of our taller giants that we have found in the modern time, Native American, when the Smithsonian went in, I believe stood about 12 feet, 12 to 13. We may even have a one of recorded 14 feet. However, the tallest one that we human beings have seen, you get your Shaquille O'Neals, you get people like that are 7 feet, upwards of 8. Back in Adam's time, according to the hadiths of the Quran, Adam was supposedly 90 feet tall. His sons were roughly 30 feet, because they were still young, so they weren't near the stature of Adam's. Which, if you do it on a scale of children comparatively, my son sits at he's probably I want to say he's probably like 4 feet, maybe 4 feet and 4 foot and a half, as to where I sit roughly 5'9", 5'10". So if we think of it in terms of that, Adam was sitting at 90 feet, supposedly. Obviously, I didn't live back at the creation of man, so I couldn't tell you off the top of my head how tall these people were, how tall these beings were. But a lot of time, it just depends on the area you're talking about. And what we find is the world was a different place back in ancient times. The continents weren't in the same location that they are today. And the research that I have been involved in and that my team has been involved in show us that the Earth itself is very old, but that the Earth has gone through drastic changes in gravity, in weather, in air content, barometric pressure. All of these things change up how men and women grow and or shrink. So a lot of your ancient folks were very, very tall to acclimate to the situation in which they were placed in. Now, civilizations have come and civilizations have gone, but almost every civilization that we have studied, whether it be Greece, whether it be Rome, whether it be Egypt, whether it be Babylon, whether it be Mesopotamia, Sumer, all of these things, they all have giants in them. They all have different pieces and historical arguments for giants. Now, it's much like the flood, which I have discussed before as well, that you have the Cyclops, which was Polyphemus, who was a very, very tall giant. I believe he said it, if I would check my notes here, I think he sits at like 13, maybe 14 feet. So you have that. You also have, Gilgamesh of the Akkadian epic poem, and he was pretty tall himself. A lot of the pictures that they show him holding what is believed to be a lion. A lot of people say it's a cat, but many people have said that it's a lion that he's holding because he was that tall, where a lion to him would be a house cat to us. So you have all of these different belief systems and cultures that espouse a giant mythos. Even the Native Americans, they talk about the black-bearded ones who were killed off by the red-bearded ones that came before the Native Americans, and the Native Americans came in and usurped control from the black or the redbeards, and then took that land. And then, as history unfolds, we know what happens after that.
Okay. Are you hearing feedback?
No, sir.
Okay. Thought I heard a little bit of rumbling. What inspired what inspired your interest for what you speak about?
Well, really, it all dates back to when I was a very younger man, much younger than I am today, of course. But I used to go to church. I went to church a lot as a kid. I went to church from about the time I was, I want to say 4 or 5, up until I was about, I want to say 18. So I was in the church a very long time. I don't go as much anymore, though I do go every now and again with my parents here and there, Easter, stuff like that, little celebrations. But I would read the Old Testament because I never followed along much with what the pastor was saying. That just, church was boring to me as a kid. It always was. I couldn't sit still long enough. I was a very hyperactive child, so I was always interested in what was going on elsewhere. But I would grab their copies of the King James version of the Bible, and I would read through the Old Testament, and I would read about the battle between David and Goliath. I would read about King Og. I would read about the Rephaim, all of these beings that were enormous in stature. And I didn't really think about it. I just thought, oh, this is cool. This is, really fascinating. And then some years later, probably around 2010, 2011, I started watching Ancient Aliens. And I think that for me kind of kickstarted everything, because then I started researching other things outside of Ancient Aliens. And I started researching, the Enochian tale of the Watchers coming down and having intercourse with human women, begetting giants or Nephilim. And it just kind of went further from there, and I just kept studying and learning. And then a few years ago, probably looking into year 3 of my study of the Quran and the Temple of Iram, or the Pillars of Iram, where Shaddad bin Ad, who was an ancient antediluvian king that reigned way back before the flood, was also a giant. He built a city. If you look in, see, I can't, the lights on it, but over here in the Middle East, there is a location that is in between Saudi Arabia, Oman, and Yemen, and right down in the empty quarter, which is a large, vast desert that sits in those 3 nations. There's a spot that I believe to be in Oman that houses the ancient city of Iram that was once swallowed by the sands, because Allah, much like God in Moses' time, punishes these sinners and these wicked people by having the earth open up and pretty much swallow their entire civilization. Then it only went on from there in legends and folk tales. There's really no evidence, but in our time, a man by the name of Nicholas Clapp went down into the empty quarter with a team looking for this ancient city, and they found different spots and different points of an ancient city, but nobody has ever found Iram. And I have an idea of where it is. I'm almost certain that's where it is from his research, from research that I've pulled in different Islamic tales and Islamic folklore. So that kind of propelled me. And then it was probably last year when I was talking to, I believe it was maybe Fred Saluga, or I believe it was Fred. And then he introduced me to Bob Schultz, and Bob, from there, asked if I would present at one of their events at the Morrill County Fire Department in Dunbar, Pennsylvania. So I did that. And from there, it just kind of steamrolled. And I've been reading books since. That's just a small amount of books that I have regarding different topics that I've researched. But my love for giants and my fascination for them extends all the way to when I was a young man reading about David and Goliath. And to me, that's one of the most famous giants, because that's the one that I grew up knowing. Like, I knew the story, David found the smoothest stones he could find, wrapped him up in that sling and shot him. And like I said, sunk the stone right in the middle of Goliath's forehead, and Goliath died there. But then when you keep reading into the Old Testament, when you're reading in Joshua, and it talks about these Rephaim that took the land from the Israelites, because the Israelites, the main theme of the Old Testament is the Israelites always turn away from God, which leads God to kind of, smack them on their rear end to bring them back in. But one of the times when they turned from God and started worshiping, these idols, you have folks like King Solomon that was lured by his lust for females, and he ends up worshiping their God. So God has to check him. Well, it's the same situation. God removes the people from their holy land. He has the people take the ark. These foreigners take the ark and abscond with it. And so they want to get it back, but God has to wait until there's a righteous man that can lead the people back in. And they end up going in, they end up fighting with King Og and his brothers. And these are men of great stature. They're men of great renown. They're very tall men. We're talking giants. And a lot of times I think people, they get the notion in their head, Jack and the Giant Beanstalk, for instance. That's a real popular kid's tale. I think when people say giants, they're thinking these massively huge men, the size of Islamic Adam, who was 90 feet. But in reality, a giant is just somebody of very tall stature. So you're having men that are 12, 13 feet high that can fight. Like I said, we're not talking about the giants that we have today, the people that be considered giants, like people like Shaquille O'Neal who can play basketball, things like that. We're talking men that can actually, we're talking like you would equate these men to our soldiers today, our Marines, our Army, our Navy. You would equate them to that. They can fight, they can throw spears, they can run in battle, they can lead horses, they can lead men. And you just really don't see that. So for me, it was definitely the idea that we come from a place of giants, and it's dotted all around. And I didn't really see that until I was much older, but as a kid, just the tales in the Bible, fascinating to me to no end. And then you have tales like Jack and the Giant Beanstalk. You have all of these tales of giants, and to me, it was just a no-brainer.
Right. Let me ask you this: are you familiar with Bill Bean?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Are you familiar with Bill Bean?
I'm afraid not, but please tell me more.
Well, I'll give you a chance to write his name down. You got a pen and piece of paper right there?
Actually, I've got a keyboard that I can type into the internet, so hit me with it.
Okay. All right. Bill,
Got it.
and his last name is Bean. Research him. I think you'll find him interesting.
Okay. I put that, and that will be in my search history, so I can just go back to my search history and go from there. So excellent.
Yeah, because he has a podcast that comes on every Friday night, and he talks about giants and other things as well. But very interesting. Some of the things that you have mentioned, I have heard, from his podcast. And I'm going to pull up one of your first pictures, and you go ahead and give us the information on it. Let me just see.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this is a good one. So what you see here is the uncovered stone head. This is from the giant of Monte Prama, and this was found in Sardinia in Italy. This is from the Nurigic civilization. This thing here is fascinating because in 1972, Luigi Muscus, who was a very interesting individual in and of itself, he was a famous painter and sculptor, and he finds these very large bones that surrounds the countryside of his village, right? And these claims, they're not just from him. They're from literally the whole city. Everybody in this city finds these bones, and you couldn't walk 2 feet without tripping over these bones, as many as were claimed to have been found. But these men stood about 13 feet of the bones that they found. And he says that when he was a child, he finds these giant skeletons. The whole city, locals, they're interviewed by journalists who come in. People get the hot scoop, and they're like, "Well, I gotta go investigate. I want to see what that's about." They also find these skeletons, and they're talking to journalists. The interesting aspect in all of this, and we'll probably touch base on this here at some point, but when these are talked about and told to interviewers, and the journalists run off, they head off. They're like, "Hey, we heard there's giants," and obviously that gets back to whatever government is in play at that time. Well, they come in and then they take the bones, and this is going to be something that happens in the United States when we get into talking about the Native Americans and their bones that they find of giants, or some of the Native Americans themselves who were giants. The Smithsonian actually comes in and takes these bones. And this is the same thing that happened here. So yeah, that was very interesting. I came upon that while doing research for my presentation. A lot of these slides that you're going to show people are in fact from my presentation that I did in it was probably, I'm trying to think here. That was roughly in, let's see, I want to say the second week of May. I'm going to say, the second week of May, because I was in Pennsylvania twice, actually, back-to-back presentations. One week I was in Dunbar, PA, and the next week I was in Butler, PA, and I did presentations in both on giants. And each one was a little different, so that the audience that came to the second one got stuff that the audience from the first one didn't get, and the audience from the first one got stuff that the audience from the second one didn't get. So I like to give people new stuff so that it keeps people fresh. It keeps me fresh. It keeps me in the know. So yeah, that thing right there, that's I would love to see it. I would love to see it. I believe that's in a museum somewhere in Italy, but I'm not exactly sure.
Awesome. Okay, let me go to this one here.
Oh yeah, that is that right there is a mound in Georgia, and that is in Catersville, Georgia, actually. And a clip from the New York Times that dates April 5th, 1886, goes on to say that acres of skulls and bones, some of these are gigantic. If the whole frame is in proportion to 2 thigh bones that were found, the owner must have stood 14 feet tall. That mound right there is the Etowah Mound and it is in Cartersville, Georgia. Now, one thing that I find to be fascinating about that picture that you just pulled up is that's in Georgia. Now, a lot of your mounds, your mound culture, sit here. They sit here in Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, but you have stuff that dates all the way out to Illinois. You got stuff that I just learned about here. This is something that, because I'm always constantly learning myself. I don't know it all. I'm not an expert. I just really enjoy the process and I enjoy finding new things. But that mound, the Etowah Mound, that is as far south as Georgia. And they're finding anytime they dig up mounds, and I'm not one for a person digging up a mound. It's almost like you're digging up somebody's grave, in my opinion. You're digging up somebody's tombstone, and I don't think some of you folks would like it if they went and dug up your ancestors. Maybe some of you would. I don't know, but I feel like it's a little disrespectful. Granted, a lot of those people don't exist anymore, but I think it's a preservation thing. I think we need to preserve that. And there's been mounds that have been cracked open, stuff's been taken. That mound specifically, like I said, they found a 14-foot tall, if they lined up everything, because a lot of times when you dig up these bones in these mound sites, the bones will deteriorate because once they hit the open air, once they hit the light, once they hit everything else, the bones just, because they've been sitting there for so long in a preserved state, when you try to move them, and that's the case with a lot of these, that they just sort of disappear. And that mound was fat. Like, that's a place I want to go. I want to go on a definite speaking tour and go to that mound right there. Like, it looks so beautiful too. You got the water behind it. So you have energy that sits there because the water is a conductor. Water is a conductor of energy. A lot of people don't understand that, but water itself is a conductor of electricity. If you ever, but don't do this. If you ever stick your finger in a light socket and step in a pool, it's going to be a bad news. It's going to be a bad time for you. You're not probably going to make it. But water is a conductor of energy. That's why a lot of times some of your highest paranormal or ghost spirit encounters happen near water, because water is just it's just that. It's an energy conductor. It conducts the energy. So what I would like to do at some point is go on a speaking tour and stop at each mound, video these mounds, and kind of put that out there for people, because I think more education needs to be pushed to these mounds, because I didn't know about this. As a kid, I didn't know about this. We didn't learn about this in school. I never learned about mounds and mound culture. I had to wait till I was a much older man to learn about this kind of stuff. But that mound right there is very, very interesting, and I really enjoy that mound. It's really cool looking.
Okay, I think this one is the same one, I think.
No, now see, that is Keys Rock. That one right there, that's McKees Rock. Sorry, McKees Rocks. Okay. And that one is located in western Pennsylvania. I actually asked people in Butler County, because this is one of the pictures that I did where people weren't, if they weren't at the first one, you didn't get this one. But if you were at the second one, you got this one. And if you're at both, you got a nice bit of information. So appreciate anybody who went to both. I appreciate everybody who showed up to the first and the second. It's really nice. So this is located in western Pennsylvania, and this is located in Allegheny County. It's known as The Rocks, I guess, to all the locals. I don't know. I've never been. I definitely want to go. But it is one of the largest mounds in the state of Pennsylvania, built by the Adena and Hopewell peoples 1,000 years before the Europeans ventured into that area. They built this large earthwork mound in the area, which, of course, would go on to be a burial site. But it was augmented years later by people of the Hopewell culture. And this is what you will find a lot of time. This is what happened with the Great Serpent Mound. They misdated the Great Serpent Mound because when they found the Great Serpent Mound, it was in good shape. What happens is these tribes come through and they feel, as respect to their ancestors or respect to the ones that came before them, they got to clean the place up. They have to clean the site up. They got to, it basically, like when you go in your yard, you're picking up sticks, you're removing different things, you're mowing your lawn. They basically were landscaping the place. So they ended up not dating that right whatsoever. And so found out that it was a lot older than it was supposed to be. But this is the same basic concept where you have the Adena who built it, but then you have the Hopewell who come through, clean it back up again to make it look pretty. Now, I was talking to a lady at the Butler event, and she told me, because there's only, they ended up excavating half of it. Like they cut into half and left the other half. And they found multiple skeletons, men that measured 7 to 8 feet, 7 to 8 feet, and some of the women were roughly about 6 feet. So you have very tall people, very tall people. Once again, we have to. I think a lot of times too, because what people don't understand is they didn't have cell towers back then. They didn't have the electromagnetic frequencies that we have in this country today that causes different health effects, different ways of thinking, things of that nature that people don't truly understand. And if we look at it, people were tall. People were very, they're digging up these mounds. I can understand if they dug up one mound and found a skeleton that was, 8 feet tall. Maybe you had a birth defect. I could get that. But when you're digging up multiple mounds across the country, you're digging up multiple mounds across the United States, and you're finding men, women, children ranging in different heights, kids being as tall as we are, 5'5", 5'6", 5'7", parents being upwards of 14 feet. One occurrence, okay, it's just a rarity. But when you have multiple mounds that have been dug up so many times, bones removed, and the interesting aspect in all this is that the bones are removed and they are never found again. And that's a good Smithsonian thing there. But yeah, McKees Rocks, that's another one that I really want to visit that I think would be. But she said, like, you just look and there's half the mound and you can see it. She's been there before, and that's really fascinating. I found it to be very interesting.
Okay, let's here's one.
Oh, these are the Patagonian giants right here. And that's Magellan. That is the famous explorer Magellan. These are 10-foot giants right there. And as you can see, he's giving them something. So he's offering them something. So obviously there's a good rapport happening here, and if you look, the man himself, I mean, they said that they were 10 feet tall. So if he's sitting at, maybe 5'6", 5'7", we're looking at a man that's another 4 foot and some change, 4 feet and some change. I mean, these are tall folks, and that's the woman, and the woman's taller. But also look at their build, look at their arm span, things like that. These are not just normal people. This is a whole tribe. But now, if you look too, while he has like a walking stick, right? What looks to be a walking stick, that doesn't necessarily mean he needs it to get around. It's just something that he has. So if you look at their thighs, like look at the thighs, they look like regular people that walk, that don't need the assistance of canes or anything like that. Normal thighs, normal, and the height, the facial expressions, the looks on the faces, larger faces. These are people that existed as a whole, as a tribe, as a group of people. And here we see Magellan giving them what looks like to be bread, maybe, or a potato even. I don't know what that is. That looks like a potato. Here's a potato. There you go. Try a potato. We brought these fresh over from Ireland. Here's a tasty potato. You can do with it what you will. So it's accounts like these that utterly to no end fascinate me. These meetings with these giants. And when you really sit back and look at it, we have been dealing with this stuff for generations. I think the reason you don't see a lot of the giants that you see today in our society is because a lot of the bones were dug up. But I also think it's our diet, it's our atmosphere, it's the change that we've had, electromagnetic frequencies. So we are not so much bound to be 12, 13 feet tall anymore, or that that just doesn't a thing. And I also think too, what affects that is the, like I said, the diets the food that we're consuming. I don't think that helps. I think that it's just over time, men, two things that human beings aren't anymore. They don't get very, very old, like in biblical times, or like in some of these other occurrences where, you have giants living 100 and some odd years, 100, 130, 140. You do have the rare occasion of one person living to be, 100 some odd years old, but you don't have the same basic concepts like you would with many people living to be, 100, 200 years old, because of the situation we're in. That's why you do not see people of great stature anymore. You don't just see 12, 13, up to 16 foot people walking around our country. You just don't. You're not going to see that because of the times we live in. I think in those ancient times, there were just different things. There was different foods. There was different ways of life that happened, and those people were taller. And if you notice, the flood happens. It talks about the flood in the Bible. We all know the flood story. And it said it killed off, all of those giants, so to speak. But here we have giants located in Joshua, and that's way after the flood. Goliath was a giant way after the flood. So giants still existed, and then giants would continue to exist. And if you go off different rumors that supposedly the Americas were the land of Nod, and there were giants there. After when Cain slays his brother Abel, he goes off to Nod, and they were both giants. If we look at the Hadiths, like I talked about previous and prior, 30-foot tall men just venturing off. Now we like to think, wow, 30-foot tall person, that would be absolutely terrifying. But if everybody around you is 30 feet tall, or if they're 30 to 40, and you're used to that, it's not going to seem like anything. But by association, everything else would have been bigger too. You would have had bigger trees. You'd have had larger animals, which is where you would get some maybe of your myths of chimera, or of the Minotaur, or of griffins, or any of those things. Any of those creatures could have existed. You're going to have taller beings. You're going to have taller animals. You're going to have taller trees. You're going to have different air quality. All of these things play part and parcel to the giant narrative as a whole. You can't have just giants and the life support to sustain them. It's just not going to happen. You have to have a different air quality, different atmosphere, different everything, different food consumption. So.
Okay, let me just all right, just want a quick shout out to the listeners. If you have a question for Robert, please include your name in with the question, because some of the questions I get don't have a name beside them, and I believe that has something to do with Facebook.
If this is anything like StreamYard, because me and my co-host use StreamYard for our podcast, because it's the same layout, the exact same layout. That's why I was like, oh, that's why I knew how to do everything, because it's just like StreamYard. The reason being is it's not linked. You have to link your socials with, you have to give it permission and all that. So it's all about giving permission for the app. So that's why a lot of times, because we've had that same thing. I've had people say, I have had to go, who is this? We've had to check our socials to see who it is. But yeah, for the most part, it's basically because they have to give it permission to access your whatever and all that jazz. So it's a process. It's a process.
Yeah, that's basically what I started out with. I didn't do a podcast, but I had signed up for Restream, and I was messing around with it. I just couldn't get a lot of it to work right, so I switched over to Restream.
And that does happen. That does happen. It just takes some time. All software takes is time to learn.
Okay. All right. I hope you don't mind me asking you this question. With Bigfoot being giants,
yes,
some 12, 13 feet tall, what is your theory on Bigfoot?
Okay, so let me just start off by saying I am not by any means I'm not very knowledgeable in Bigfoot. I have dabbled. I know bits and pieces about Bigfoot. I don't know the whole narrative, so I'm going into it with everybody knowing this. My thought on this is that Native Americans themselves had teamed up with Bigfoot, or these Bigfoot-like creatures that were massive. They were large, bipedal, ape-looking humanoid creatures, and they would fight against other tribes. I believe even the Europeans that came over. These Bigfoot were on the side of the Native Americans, and I think that they would have to be giants, because these are, like I said, I think Bigfoot honestly is just a relic from that bygone era of when men were taller. Like I said, it would have to make sense, because I think the one thing we don't understand is that there were many, many different creatures, beings, spirits that lived here before technology. Modern technology is what drove all of the Fey folk, all of the Bigfoot, all of these creatures into the recesses of our planet. Because at one time, there's too many accounts of things happening, fairy rings, Fey folk, people seeing them in Ireland and places where they are basically a national treasure. Then here you have Bigfoot, you have Mothman, you've had all of these sightings of these beings. You have the Dog Man in Wisconsin, but these are all, I think, bygone relics from a time that many of us don't know because we didn't grow up in any of that. None of us grew up in 1800s era, 1700s, 1600s, before that. And I think when you had the biggest detriment to the cryptid way of life or these beings and their way of life was the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution is what destroyed many, many of these beings' homes, because here you have these large factories pumping out whatever, because that's the thing. We have regulations today, and even the stuff that is pumped out of these factories isn't good for you. The air pollution is still a serious thing. And I think that air pollution from, the Victorian England and the Industrial Revolution time period pushed all of these beings into the far reaches. And I think that's what did it here. And I think the same thing with Bigfoot. It pushed Bigfoot into the recesses of wherever. But I also think Bigfoot is in a weird way interdimensional, because you have some accounts about Bigfoot. If anybody's ever read the missing, or not read, I'm sorry. Oh yeah, the missing 411. Any of those books or seen any of those documentaries, there have been cases of a furry man, a giant furry man, taking kids or people, disappearing, and then reappearing, miles later on top of a cave. And they're just sitting there, and the kid's sitting there unharmed, just being a kid. And that is sort of fascinating. And then you have also occurrences where Bigfoot comes into the woods and the woods get silent. Like you can't hear anything. It just gets dead silent. And a lot of people say, some people like to go with the theory that it's just an ape creature, animal, humanoid type of creature. There's nothing mysterious around it. None of that. But I think as a being or as a presence, when you go into the woods and everything stops around you, that's a little bit more than just an animal. That's a little bit more than just your average creature. That's something else. And I think that something else is definitely giant in stature. You couldn't have a Bigfoot that's tall like us, because then you just have a gorilla, more or less. You just have a large gorilla. Right. And the intelligence that some of these creatures have is next level. They know what they're doing. They know how to communicate. They have samurai chatter that almost sounds very Native American, because I've heard different Native American dialects. I've heard Japanese dialects. And the interesting aspect and note to take in all of this is that these Bigfoot sound very similar. Ron Moorhead, he had a bit part in one of the missing 411s, and they can hear it. They hear it talking outside. And it sounded to me a little bit Japanese and a little bit Native American. Like there was some communication there that comes from those two languages somehow in some way. But like I said, the continents at one time were linked together. You have, you can see it. It's like a puzzle piece. Our continents, if you look above me here, you have South America, and then here you have Africa, and it looks like this just fits right into there like that. You just put them on in. The land changes a little bit, sure, erosion and things like that happen, but that's what fascinates me. Like if you look up here, if you look at this whole aspect, it looks like you just fit these two little things together like that, and boom, you have yourself a supercontinent. And that's what I think. I think that Bigfoot himself or herself is a relic from a bygone era. And the reason people see them is because they want to be seen. We go, people love to say, because we're human beings, we like to think that we are the end all be all, that we are the top of the food chain, and that nothing else could usurp our role as the dominant species. But the Bigfoot or the Dog Man Native Americans, they know those woods and that forest better than most people do. They know it better than most people. That's the interesting aspect. If you don't want to be found, the forest is the best way to go. Because Pacific Northwest, as an example, we talked about that last night on the podcast. You want to get lost, go to the Pacific Northwest. It's unlike anything I've never been there, but I want to go, not to get lost, mind you. But you know, you go about a mile or two from my house, head south. There's a place called Rogues Hollow. Well, Rogues Hollow in the summertime is packed. It's dense. It looks like it goes on forever. Come back about February and it looks like somebody's backyard. That's how big it looks. It looks like somebody's normal backyard because when there's no foliage, when there's no leaves on the trees, it just looks barren. But you go to a place like the Pacific Northwest, even though you can see, you're still going to get lost because it's a giant wilderness. And that's the thing. I think that Bigfoot is one of those creatures that knows the wilderness, knows the woods, knows its area, knows its location, hides. And I definitely think that Bigfoot is definitely a giant because you don't hear reports very often of these smaller variations. Like, you know, I think the skunk ape might be one of those ones that's a little bit shorter. Like I said, I'm not well versed in Bigfoot, so I won't get on here and act like I know things that I don't know. I'll be the first to tell you about that one. But I if I'm not mistaken, I believe the skunk ape is on the shorter end of the Bigfoot spectrum, as to where some of your taller Bigfoot, like your normal Bigfoot, the one that people all know, is probably roughly 8-9 feet tall, maybe a little bit taller than that. And I think most of them are that tall. But like I said, we haven't even mapped out the full ocean, and Lord knows what's down there. I don't want to know what's down there. I want to sleep well at night. I don't want to know what kind of giant squid or octopi are living down at the depths of our ocean. I want to sleep good. But I think we don't even know what's in our forests, let alone what's in the ocean and things like that. So I think that it's definitely a giant. But like I said, I think it's that creature that lived in those bygone eras, and it just keeps its population at a steady pace, and it just goes from there, to be honest.
Wow. Very interesting.
Thank you.
Robert.
Yes, sir.
Very knowledgeable. I'm going to let you pick a topic. Let's get back to giants and your choice.
Okay, so what I think that we should be talking about that a lot of people don't talk about is these mounds and the giants they found in them. But I also think it's the Smithsonian's role in this whole shebang. Now, I didn't send you anything regarding Smithsonian, and I wish I would have. But let me pull something up here. Now I don't know if it works like it. If it works like it does. Oh, it does. So yeah, this is basically the same basic concept here. All right. I don't know if so if you want to pull this over, I just shared something. I don't know if you can pull this over and I can discuss it.
Where would it be?
All right, let me see something here because I put it to the share screen. So it might be, I believe that you have to share it. So I put it in because if you go to the middle there, you can do screen sharing. Because like I said, this is just like StreamYard. That's because I share a lot of our stuff that we have via that. And if not, that's fine. I can just talk about it. That's not a big deal. If you can't. Yeah, no worries.
There's a lot of notes I have written down, things I need to improve on.
If you need help, just let me know. I know StreamYard pretty well. They're not, like I said, they're not too radically different. Just color variations is a little bit different than that. That's probably just
right.
So people don't get sued. So
that's why I thought, I've been telling the listeners to put their name in with the question because I thought it was a Facebook rule or, that sort of thing. But yeah, go ahead and discuss it.
So what we have here, well, you guys can't see it. I keep thinking everybody can see it. So so the Smithsonian cover up is basically all of these scientists got together, and there were archaeologists, they were doctors, they were scientists, all of them get together, and they start pulling these giant bones from these mound sites, and the Smithsonian gets them and then ships them right out to one of the many museums. At the time, they didn't have as many museums as they have today. And I've been to a few. I've been to the the National Air and Space Museum. They have two of them. They have one in downtown DC and they have another in Virginia. I've been to both. And so they take these bones, and the bones themselves, they don't return them. They're gone. Nobody's been able to find them either. So they're either doing one of two things. They're storing them somewhere, because they could literally just store them under your nose. They could really just store them. You know, we see a lot of, if you go into forests and you have the Department of Wildlife Management and they have park rangers and things like that, it wouldn't be hard just to store them in a facility. Nobody would ever go there. It's like people are breaking in, trying to get these giant bones. That, you know, nobody ever does this. Nobody ever tries to go and tackle these things, which they should, I personally think. You know, almost like the raid Area 51. I remember that was a big thing a few years back. But yeah, the idea that a institution would come in and remove bones of 12, 13, 14, you know, up to 16-foot men and a lesser statured women, that they would take these and then get rid of them. You would think that a institution like the Smithsonian would want to be, in terms of saying, you know what, we found these bones. We are the premier source of all things giant. We're going to brag to the hills about it. We're going to take it all the way as far as we can, unless, and if, you know, if any of the listeners out there, if you guys have anything you want to add to this, and you know, I could be off base, but it seems to me that the Smithsonian doesn't want us to know where we come from, where we truly come from. And I think that if this got out, if this was true, if this was a thing that they could, you know, put out there, it would rewrite our entire history. And they've already built the history. It's kind of like they've built up on a lie, but they're so deep into the lie now that they can't back out now. They back out now, it would lose all credibility. And then maybe as a whole, science would lose all credibility. And I think that terrifies them. But when you start seeing the cover-ups, and there's been many a cover-up, like I said, if this was one instance or maybe 15 instances, I could say, okay, you know what, maybe it's deeper to the story. Maybe they lost them in transit, which could happen. I'm not saying these things don't happen. You always, in my line of research and work and things of that nature, you always look for the thing that makes the most sense first. And then if that doesn't work, then you begin to rule out everything else. And only when you rule out everything that's possible can you start going into the unknown and say, okay, maybe this isn't just as easy as we thought it is. But when you have multiple instances of the Smithsonian coming in and buying bones and taking bones and removing them from mound sites, never to be seen again, coming in to places in Arizona and removing these cliff dwelling, you know, these skeletons that were measuring 12 feet tall, and you're removing these things. You're basically taking these bones and you're not giving them back. You're not putting them in a museum. I get it. You find a lot of bones. You don't want to put all of them in a museum. You would house some of them and then put them on a circuit, much like some of the Egyptian artifacts where they come to this museum, you know, like the museum in Cleveland, and they make rounds and they go back home. But not even one giant skeleton you would want to put out there for people to say, wow, I can't believe this was the thing. No, they hide and then they destroy. They hide and they destroy, or they just hide. We don't know. It's so top secret government level knowledge that we don't know. And of course, you're going to have scientists come out and say, oh, that's not true. I read an article back when I was presenting a few months ago, before when I was doing my research, and it said it's not true. And I'm like, how is it not true when you have multiple accounts? When you have multiple newspaper clippings? We're talking old school newspaper clippings from the 1800s. And it's not just like one newspaper. It's newspapers around the country that were talking about this, about people on farmlands in Ohio and Pennsylvania finding these bones that they were massive. They were massive. And then you have people like Ales Hardlicka, who was a scientist over at the Smithsonian, which I tried to pull up, but we couldn't get that to go, which is fine. You can look it up, ALESHRD, let's see, LICA. He definitely he's a very grumpy man. If any pull him up, it looks like he's always mad, like he's never had a good time in his entire existence. And I see why. He was even saying and said, if you find evidence of human life in a context which is ancient, bury it carefully but do not forget about it. So hide it, and essentially don't forget where it is, because later you can come back and grab it. But don't tell anybody. Don't let anybody know where it is. Just and there's a couple. There's another gentleman here that I can't named. Let me see here. Captain Newton H. Chittenden. He was a famous ethnologist, archaeologist, and explorer. Well, one day he goes into a Indian graveyard and steals the skull of a giant. Literally takes it, comes back, and then turns around and gives it to the Smithsonian. Literally hands that to them. Another one, he found giant remains and gave it to a high school. I would love to see where those remains ended up, though. I wonder if the Smithsonian came back in and went to the high school and said, "Hey, we'll buy that skeleton off of you, or we'll donate to your sports program, or we'll donate to your, your textbook program, whatever," and took it. But that's the thing. I want to know the reason why. I want to know why you would keep history like this from us. Why? Are you that afraid of what we would really find out? Are you that afraid that maybe all of these religious texts, all these texts of myth have been 100% spot on accurate, and it would basically overthrow your ideologies? You wouldn't be able to have sway over us anymore, because then, this is something that would have a rippling effect, because if we catch you lying here, and everybody knows the government lies, even if you are 100% not a Bigfoot person, not a UFO person, you don't even know the paranormal, you don't think it's real, you can be an atheist, you can be whatever. Everybody knows the government lies. And I mean, that's easily proven. You look at any politician, I mean, anyone, I don't have any specific leanings either way. You look at any politician worth their weight in salt, and they will always say, I'll do this for you. And then they don't do it. They don't do that thing. And that's a base level thing. But when you get into something like this, that really throws off everything, throws off history as a whole, you can no longer say, oh, giants don't exist. Now you have to say giants existed. Now you have to say, well, maybe the Bible was right, or maybe the Quran was right, or maybe the Torah was right, or maybe this mythology, right, in quotation marks, isn't so much mythology as it is, things passed down generation to generation. That's the thing. People, I think the best thing that the Smithsonian wants to do, or our government as a whole, is take any mystical or magical thing out of our society that they possibly can. It's easy to hold sway over people if life doesn't have an interesting backstory. It's easy to say, we can provide you all of that technology and all that. And this isn't me trying to go on a political rant. I'm not trying to do that. I'm not that type of person. Right. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to expose the Smithsonian as saying, hey, you came in, you took these bones, and you didn't say nothing. You took them and left. You didn't bother to have an exhibit. You didn't bother to put them out there so people could see them. No, you snagged them and then you left. And then you either A, you destroyed them, which is it's a very dishonorable thing to do, or B, you have them hidden somewhere like in the Indiana Jones movie with top men that can't, that'll never be known. And that's the thing, it's either one or the other with them. I think some of them were destroyed, sure. You're not going to just, what are you going to do with them? Or they could have been cataloged, put in a crate, and stored somewhere in a facility. Maybe try to pull whatever, interesting DNA information you can out of the bones. But it's like we talked about earlier in Italy when they did it. So this is one of those things. It's not just a USA thing. It is a worldwide thing. And you have to wonder places like Egypt or a lot of your Islamic countries where you can't just go in all willy-nilly and start digging around or looking around, or you have to have, like, if you go to Egypt and you get caught digging in anything, digging in your neighbor's potted plant, you're going to face some time, especially if you are a foreign national. You're 100% going to face some time because people are very particular over their history. We are, we're no different, except ours, I think, is more nefarious because it upends everything. A lot of people like to say, well, if people knew about UFOs, it would change humanity drastically. I think by this point, to be perfectly honest with you, I don't think it would change mankind very much at all. I think people are pretty comfortable with the fact of UFOs. You might have a few religions that might get a little nervous, but for the most part, because everybody knows the government's not going to tell you the truth about UFOs. They're not going to say, of course there's aliens, or of course we've went to other planets. But I think much like the Smithsonian, that's another reason. Because if they give you too much information, you're like, well, you didn't bother telling us this before when you knew, 50 years ago. You didn't bother telling us about these giant bones that you realized that there was giant civilizations, and that maybe the idea of David and Goliath might be real after all. Because then that just leads people to more questions and more questions. And once you get enough people together to start questioning things, then the government looks at that as a threat. I mean, look at the Area 51 people. The government was like, if you come in here, we will shoot you. We will kill you. We will protect whatever secrets we can because we have to. And the funny thing is, like, that's not even, if anybody's ever seen a map of that area, of that whole span, that's not even the most important place in that area. Like, they're far that I don't, and from what I've heard, I don't even think Area 51 is even much in use anymore, other than like one of those like storage facilities. A lot of the other places are far, far more active than Area 51 is, which makes sense. Why would you keep everything there if everybody knows about it? You're going to keep it somewhere where nobody knows about it.
Right.
So to me, I think exposing these kinds of things is what we should be doing fairly. Obviously, from an education standpoint, we shouldn't be going and causing violence and mayhem, because that doesn't prove the point. And the one thing that the government can do, or any government can do, is twist their media or their newspapers to paint those people as bad guys the minute any violence happens. We've seen it happen before. We're going to see it happen, especially when it comes to something. You're protecting something. You're protecting a thing that most people don't know about, or they don't care. And I think that's another problem we have in the world today, is a lot of people just don't care about this stuff. A lot of people won't go the full nine because they have jobs, they have families. They don't have time to go, bother the Smithsonian about their record on giants. We have busy lives. We live in a time that is probably one of the most busiest in our current history. And I mean from recorded history that we can put, pen and paper to, till now. I have no idea before. You have civilizations that have risen and fallen, that have come and gone. There's civilizations we will never know because they don't exist anymore. You've heard the tale of Atlantis, that existed and fell, but there's civilizations that nobody will ever know, that you may hear on unquieted breaths that nobody can find information for. And so we live in a civilization, in my opinion, is the busiest that it's ever been, with production, with manufacturing. So people don't have time. People don't have time to go out to the Smithsonian, find out it's true, interview people from the Smithsonian, because you can't go to Jill, who's working at the customer help desk at the Smithsonian, and say, hey, where are you hiding the giant bones? You can't do that. You can't harass that person. That person might not be up on that. Your low level employees, they're not going to have any idea of that. You need to hit your top ranked folks, and it may extend out into different branches of the United States government. But for me, I think that's what we have to get that more into schools. We have to get that more into college educated classrooms about giants, about the things that were found, about our history, because we have to preserve the history that we have, because if you don't, it gets destroyed, and then things end up repeating themselves, whether that be, different, leaders coming and going. Do I think giants will come back? No, unless our Earth goes through a drastic change. I don't think we're going to wake up tomorrow and see 30-foot tall Cain and Abel moseying around trying to, but it's just interesting to me, because you have the tale of Paul Bunyan and Babe the Blue Ox, another giant, and a giant ox. So once again, if Cain and Abel are with the sheep had to be large too. And that's the thing. And I think we need to delve more into that. We need to really focus on why the Smithsonian has done what they have done, because in most places, you would think a discovery. A lot of times when archaeologists find a grand discovery, it's posted everywhere. Everywhere in the archaeological world, it is posted for everybody to see, because it's almost like a bragging right. It's like, right, check it out. Check out what I found. I found, evidence that there could have been a second Sphinx in Egypt. And, there was, they pretty much have all but said there's a second Sphinx that was in Egypt at one point.
Hey, Robert.
Yes, sir.
I just want to throw something in there real quick.
Please do.
I remember back in the days, let's see, I investigated the paranormal from the early 80s until 2016. But back in the days, I remember the Smithsonian removing a tombstone from Druid Hill Ridge Cemetery of uh, folklore. There was Black Aggie. Okay, it was the tombstone of a general, but it looked like a lady. It had a cape over its head. And a lot of people were going there late at night, trespassing and bothering it. And somebody actually went there and chopped the arm off of it.
Oh,
So the Smithsonian went in, they took it, and they put it in the basement of the Smithsonian, covered it up, and forgot about it for a lot of years. Then they took it out, they put it in the courtyard, and they still haven't put it on display. So
they put it in a courtyard though, so people could still see it. Correct?
I'm not even sure about that. Yeah.
I wonder, and that could just be a case of trying to protect it from vandalism, which
Right.
I'm all for. Why were they messing with it in the first place? I don't really know this story, so it's kind of a new tale for me.
When you get time, look up Black Aggie and read the story on it. It was in a cemetery. People would go there and say at night the eyes would glow, and there was a lot of college students that would go there and do EVPs and have seances and stuff like that.
People love doing wild things like that too.
Yeah, they just couldn't stay out of the cemetery. They would cut the chain, walk in, or climb over the fence, and they just wouldn't leave it alone.
It's still, I think sometimes that they might go in and preserve history. For as much as they've hid, they have to preserve at least some of it. And they do have some pretty amazing museums. I've been, like I said, the one in Virginia is fascinating. It's a very interesting. I've saw one of the prototypes for a jetpack. And that was cool to me. I saw one of an early robot build with a human face. This is very early. It had Ford on it. I have a picture, I think, floating on my Facebook of that, and that kind of stuff. I'm not going to say that it doesn't fascinate me, because it really does. I'm really enthralled by, because I'm not one just to be into giants. I'm into the paranormal. I'm into UFOs. In fact, my next round of presentations will be about UFOs and abductions, because that's another thing that fascinates me is abductions, like the stories and the Rh negative blood and the different alien species that are thought to exist, from the Pleiadians to the Greys to the reptilians, all of it. There's not really one thing that I'm not fascinated with. If I had to say, it would probably be more on the Bigfoot spectrum, just because Bigfoot is really oversaturated. There's a lot of people into it. So, you get, and listen, if people are into it, that's awesome. It's good to see people at least going out. Like I love hearing about, I got friends, Jamie and Jenny King, they go out into some of these forests and they interact with Bigfoot. And that fascinates me. Like, to be able to interact with something that most people doesn't think exists. Or, I got a buddy of mine, another one, Mike, in the shadow of the big red eye. He goes to these places, different swamplands and areas, and they have encounters. And that's fascinating to me. I would love to go on one of those little adventures and hear things and see things, because I think that's also part of this. I think that's part of research. It's one thing to read a book. It's one thing to read newspaper clippings from the 18 to 1900s, but to sit down with people like we're doing now and have conversations is how you really learn. You can spout all the data you want, but if you don't have connections with people and, can sit down and talk to people, I think that that's very important. And like I said, I love talking about all things paranormal. It doesn't matter what it is. And like I said, I have a little vested interest in Bigfoot myself. I think there are certain facets of the Bigfoot legends, like Chestnut Ridge. Supposedly 2 Bigfoot came out of the UFO, came walking out of the UFO. So that to me is fascinating. So like I said, I don't knock anybody in the field that they're researching, because listen, we're all in this together. And we could all learn together. It's not just something we need to keep to ourselves.
Right. Yeah, I from the early 80s all the way up till 2016. It was like the early 90s when I started traveling up and down the East Coast, going to different paranormal locations. I still have two places on my bucket list, and one would be the Queen Mary. The second one would
nice.
be Alcatraz.
Oh, okay.
I would love to go there, but all those years I put into the paranormal, I traveled quite a bit up and down the East Coast, and I've been a lot of places. So, but the thing that concerns me about researching Bigfoot, like you said, is saturated. But there's too much argument, too much. I know this. You're wrong. I'm right. When I see that stuff, I just like scroll down, go past it. I don't want to hear about it.
Same.
Because there is no expert.
No.
There is no expert.
And I think that's what's so great about the things we all research. There's no expert. I have friends that are more into the paranormal. They like to go on, talk to spirits and do ghost hunts and things like that. And that is their forte. They highly enjoy that. And they'll even tell you we're not experts. And I'll tell you personally, me, myself, I'm not an expert in giants. I know a microcosm about giants compared to the macrocosm that we live in. I don't know everything. And I'll be the first one to say that. I'll be the first one to tell people, listen, go research this stuff yourself. You don't have to take everything I say as fact. Obviously the documented stuff that I show is fact. And, there's just some things that are fact. You can't deter from that. This is what was written in this newspaper. And that is just the fact of what was written. You can't do anything about that. But in terms of theories that I have, they're not facts. They're just theories because I can't prove them. I have different theories about Mars that I can't prove. They're just fun to entertain. They're fun to sit with myself sometimes and just think, wow, what if this is the case? What if we're far more advanced than we ever thought possible? And we get to a point in our civilizations where we reach a high point and then we destroy ourselves, or we destroy the world, or we destroy civilizations as a whole. And then we kind of sort of nuke ourselves back into a, prehistoric era, so to speak. And we have to start again. And we build, destroy, build, destroy. But each time we get a little bit higher and then we destroy. And the one thing I always tell people, because people will measure what civilizations can do by what we do. And I don't think that that's the case. I think, places like Atlantis, where supposedly they could use crystals to harness energy. And then you come to find out that certain crystals or certain rocks and things of that nature have their own energy. And they can do these little things that a lot of people didn't think they could do until scientists said, no, these things will do this, or they have the power. Look at gold, one of the most valuable metals on the planet. Semiconductors. There's gold in semiconductors for your computers, for your phones, things like that. That people just thought it was a metal, but here it comes. It has great properties. The capstones on the pyramids were gold, and gold is a great conductor of electricity. The whole pyramid thing fascinates me. There's so many things that I'm fascinated with, and if given the opportunity to travel, would answer so many of my questions, because I think that's my favorite thing. My favorite thing, I love reading. I love doing the research. I enjoy that. I get to sit here, listen to my music and just research, and I love doing that. But my favorite thing, my all-time favorite thing, is traveling and meeting like minds, or even not like minds, honestly, and having conversations so that I can get asked questions, because it's always better to bounce ideas off each other, because there's always going to be that one person. I've been it. My friends have been it. Random people have been it, that will throw that one thing out at you that you didn't consider, because your brain wasn't wired to consider it that way. It was wired to consider it another way. But somebody will drop a little thing in and say, well, what if giants didn't use the same energy we did? What if the antediluvian era was a whole different ball game? They didn't have electricity like we had today. They didn't have the power lines that we have today, because they didn't think in terms how we thought in terms. They thought in terms of other ways. Because you have things like the Baghdad battery that was found. They're talking about a jar that was basically a battery. They were able to make a battery out of it, you know? And so if you're doing that, and then you look at different ley lines that one sits underneath the Vatican, one of the major points sits underneath the Vatican, another underneath the White House. You know, buildings were made back then to perform a certain way. A lot of your churches, that energy, you know, a lot of people will balk at religion like it's some joke, but they have measured the energy and the way the air feels, and found that things are different in places of high worship where people are gathering their energy and focused on one specific goal. Things have been known to change. And you can even take it down to a one person level. Look at a person who achieves things and that's all they think about. They wake up thinking about it. They go to bed thinking about it. They live their entire life like they've already done it. And they do it. They absolutely do it. And so I think that we need to start looking at things from a better angle than what we're looking at them, and taking into things that maybe in consideration that not everything should be measured to our civilized standards, because you have a predominant amount of my family members come from the Appalachian Mountains. So we had granny witches in our family. We had all of these poultices and potions and things that were made that I couldn't make one today. I couldn't tell you how to do it, because I am, I don't want to say civilized, because I think that's a term because I don't think you have to be of this era to be civilized. I think you can be in any era. I think you can come from any way, but I can't do those things. I mean, I could if I sat down and learned how to do it. What I'm saying is I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, other than taking an Advil or an aspirin, how to fix something. And here you have this whole notion of people being able to fix things. So
Here's a question for you. All our lives we've heard about UFOs. Okay, UFOs this, UFOs here, there. But recently, I've noticed that we're hearing more reports about UFOs sightings today than we did before. Okay, why do you think that is? Do you think, let's see, where do I want to take it? Do you think there's a breakthrough coming?
okay, so let me ask you this question before I delve into this. What do you mean by before? What time frame are you talking when you say before?
Well, growing up as a kid and into your teenage years, you would see reports in magazines and stuff like that, and maybe hear about it on the radio and the TV from time to time. But today, it seems like it's every day now.
Okay, so I will say this first of all. Just I think now we have more media readily available that we didn't have before. And back then you couldn't, if you saw a UFO in the sky, you couldn't just whip out your smartphone. You couldn't just, if you had one of them giant camcorders that, my family used to have, the real big ones you had to mount on your shoulder. Sure. But people just weren't carrying those in their pockets. Also, I think, and somebody told me this, a young lady that was at one of the presentations that I was at, she told me, she said, well, what if these cover-ups are just a way, or what if this UFO talk is a way for them to not talk about artificial intelligence, which is a whole another animal that we covered a few weeks back. So in that regard, knocking those two things out of the park here on that one, what I think is that at some point they're going to have to come full out and say, yes, there's UFOs, because people aren't buying it anymore. They're not buying that they don't exist. I saw a UFO back in, I want to say, the summer of 2021. I was sitting outside. A lot of things were closed. This is where when everybody was worried about the pandemic and things were going kind of a little bit haywire. I wouldn't say totally haywire, but things weren't as grand back then. And I remember sitting on I have like a rocking swing, like a porch rocker. You just sit on it. And, I sat out there for a couple hours and just kind of stare out the sky. And I remember looking up and I saw, if anybody's ever seen it, Flight of the Navigator. It's an old Disney movie. And it looked like a sunflower seed. That's the best way I can describe it. It was silver. And I saw it. I looked up and there it was. And it sat there for a minute. And then it disappeared and it reappeared. And it was about that far apart. But in the sky, obviously, it's going to be a lot further because measuring for distance. Right. And I was like, okay, that's different. I was just like, wow, that's really cool. And then I saw it 2 weeks later, did the same exact thing. Normally, first time, okay, maybe it's some government. And it could still be, when I say UFO, I don't mean just an alien. I just mean it's an unidentified flying object. I don't know. I can't identify it, hence unidentified. And we're getting to a point where people are seeing these things much more than they ever have. They're seeing different shapes. They're seeing variations. They're seeing different colors in the sky that weren't there before. They're seeing these ships. And some people, my grandmother, she saw a UFO almost touch down in a field when she was a kid, when she was younger. And my father told me this about 2-3 years ago. And I said, what is it? It said, your grandmother saw a UFO. It was out in one of the farm fields and it came close to touching down. And I said, at that point, you can no longer hide something that's in plain sight. You have to, and I think they're getting ahead of it is what I think they're trying to do. Because listen, there's too many of us. There's way too many of us, with Bob Lazar and all of them coming forward saying, yeah, the creatures in these spacecraft, they exist. You can only stop that for so long. And with the advent of social media, it's darn near impossible to be able to keep a lid on these things. You can't. When so many people see it, like I've said before, especially with the giants, with the bones and stuff, I can understand a mound or two being excavated and you finding maybe 1 or 2 bones that would equate to a 10-foot, 11-foot tall person. Maybe it was just gigantism. Maybe it was a birth defect. Maybe it was just your DNA was altered slightly, your genetic code's off. But when you have multiple mounds that are found and there's multiple instances of people being 13, 14, 15 feet tall, and there's records of that, it's much like UFOs. Once you've seen, I don't know how many cases are present, but I want to say at least 1 million people have probably seen a UFO in their lifetime. And we aren't counting the people who do not talk about it. Because I think in this day and age, more so than ever, the paranormal as a whole is considered to be all right to talk about. You can talk about, when I was a kid, you couldn't talk about seeing ghosts. In my parents' time and their parents and then my grandparents' time, you couldn't. That was kept between family members. That was kept between the grandmothers and the grandfathers. And yeah, they probably did see stuff that we would take as spirits or ghosts or hauntings. They didn't talk about it. My mother lived in a house that she would hear doors slam and she would hear people running upstairs. Things were weird in that house, but it wasn't something you broadcasted. You didn't go to school and tell everybody, yeah, I saw a UFO or I saw a ghost, because it was frowned upon. You were looked at as an outcast. You were looked at as a weirdo. And it was that time frame that a lot of people saw things and didn't get mentioned. But now it's just, hey, because whenever somebody, the first thing out of somebody's mouth, if they're around me and they say, yeah, I've seen this, I've seen that, well, tell me about it, because I want to hear it. I've always been one to be fascinated with hearing people's stories involving these beings or these creatures or these entities, and they can be demons, spirits, whatever, what have you. I don't really believe in the soul, the departed remaining here on earth to be ghosts. That's not something I believe in. I believe that when you die, your soul goes on back to the Creator, and then it goes forth from where it's going to go from there. But I don't believe you stay here. But I do believe there's a residual energy that sits. If you go to any, and I've been to Mansfield Reformatory, I've been to the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, and you feel that weight, you feel that brunt of sadness of things that happen. You know that this place is an evil place. But with UFOs, you can't hide it. You can't hide it. And I think now with social media, that's the reason why you see more and more reports, because there's more and more people that are saying, listen, we want to know, and we're either going to find out our way, or you could do this the easy way, or you can do it the hard way. and there's too many of us. The government can't kidnap everybody. They can't kidnap everybody. They really cannot.
That's right.
They do go after people, and I believe that if you get too close, way too close, because the average person won't get that close. They're not going to have friends on the inside, and a lot of time you can just dismiss them as kooks. When you have people like Bob Lazar, who you can't just kidnap now. If anything happens to him,
Right.
the first group of people they're going to look at is going to be the government. Then what you've done is you've created a martyr. You've created a martyr for the cause, and people will rally around martyrs. Now you got a whole S show going on, and it's a mess. So they're not going to go after him. But I think, a lot of these hackers, that get on the dark web and they release some of the government information, they find the government will kidnap those types of people. Shoot, they could. Some of the things that I've talked about, or some of the things that I probably found, they probably come get me for. But good luck, because it's not going to be fun for anybody, And I don't mean any malicious ill will with the things I'm researching. I just want to know that I want the truth. I want to know what's going on, because it's not just as clear cut and bright as everybody may seem. I think there's a lot of things that go on in our planet, on our Earth, that your average everyday person doesn't care about it. They don't care. They come home, they watch sports or they watch the news, and they go to bed, and they get up and they go to work and they do the same thing all over again. And that's perfectly fine. Everybody has a life to live. I personally I'm fascinated with things that are sort of different. And so I think that as we go on, you can't hide something once it becomes in plain sight. What I could see the government doing is saying that was us the whole time. That was our ships. We were just developing technology that we didn't want to tell you guys about and get ahead of it. Because I have heard from a couple different people that the government has anywhere up to 15 to 25 years. They're technologically advanced than what you see right now. What you see right now isn't what the government has, it's what they had. And they're just giving you a piece of it in that regard. So,
Do you remember the Jesse Ventura show?
yes, I sure do.
Oh, I love that show.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, he tried to put some stuff out there, but that was a pretty good show.
You can only go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I can't find it anywhere. I can't find it on Roku or. Yeah.
If government doesn't want you to know things, they'll make sure you don't know things. They'll remove everything they can to get from it. I think too, a lot of before he went too off the rails, Alex Jones was another one that was exposing some things, and he kind of went all the way, a little crazy, whatever. That's not for here or there. But I think a lot of times you'll have these characters that come out and they say some real things, and the government's like, "Whoa, we can't. Nope, we're not doing that today." And then they'll do things to sort of slander them or do things to drive them crazy. There's been reports of what's known as gang harassment that the government has done to people, where they'll park outside of their home, where they'll harass them, men in black, all these kinds of things. When you get too close to things that you shouldn't know, things happen to you. They listen on your phone conversations. The government does that anyways. And with people on social media posting their whole entire life stories and pictures and all that, the government already keeps that record. It came out that the government during the time of the coronavirus were silencing doctors on Twitter. They were using Twitter as an arm to silence dissidents. And this isn't something that I'm like, this is a conspiracy. That they had hearings where they had people ask, "Hey, did the government ask you to do that?" And yes, Twitter, they came out and said, "Yeah, we were doing that. We were silencing Harvard and all these other doctors regarding the coronavirus. We were silencing them." And listen, like I said, I'm a bit of a conspiracy theorist myself, maybe not full-blown tinfoil hat type of thing, but there's things that I think the government has done. If we look at Operation Paperclip or Operation Northwoods, two things that people thought, oh no, they would never do that, and they did both of those. They had a plan to have people dress up as the Cuban military, so they had a reason to invade Cuba. They brought Nazis over. Operation Paperclip, they brought actual Nazis. Wernher von Braun, the inventor of the V2 rocket, was brought over here and ended up heading up NASA and all these space programs. that a little Nazi. So, I think when we have those things, one of my favorite um, radio hosts was Art Bell, probably my all-time favorite.
Oh yeah.
I love Coast to Coast. I still listen to Coast to Coast. I listen to Midnight in the Desert, and I listen to Dark Matter. Those were all, under Art Bell. And while I didn't agree with everything Art said, I respected that he had people on that had some of the best concepts and ideas for what was going on. I don't listen to Coast as much as I used to. First of all, it's on like at a weird time that I'm usually not up, like 2-3 in the morning, because it's on West Coast time.
Right.
But I go back and listen to some of the older episodes, especially the Art Bell ones, because I loved Art Bell. I thought he was fantastic. Some of the reason I got into this was because I saw that Art Bell did, and I said, I can do that too. I love having conversations, and like having conversations with people is my favorite thing. That's my favorite thing to do, especially when you get people that are into what I'm into. Because like I said, I'm into most everything. There's not really anything I'm not into. I have some that I'm into more than others. But if the conversation's there, then I'm there. So.
Right. Yeah, one of the most interesting people I've ever met was Travis Walton.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I spent 3 days with him, had lunch, dinner, and he spoke to me about being abducted. And I'll tell you what, his story never changed one bit.
Do you think he was abducted?
I do.
Okay. Listen, and I'm not saying that he wasn't. I'm not saying that he was. I've never met the man. If anybody has connections, I would love to meet him, because like he's him and Whitley Strieber, two men that were abducted. I'm not going to say supposed, because I'm not as many instances and reports of people being kidnapped by the government. I highly believe that it's possible to be abducted. I think that his story is fascinating. But anyways, I did not mean to interrupt you, by the way. Please continue.
Yeah, he, like I said, I spent 3 days with him at Phenomenology in Gettysburg. And like I said, we had lunch, dinner, and I didn't get to do an interview with him. Me and my partner, Gary French, had lunch with him and dinner, and very, very interesting. Yeah. I from time to time I watch the show that he did, Fire in the Sky. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And very interesting. I just had a question for you, and it like
It's the government tapping into your brain. They don't want you asking the question.
fog. Yes,
Yeah.
brain fog.
They're like, we're not going to ask that question. God knows too much.
Oh my dear Lord, brain fog.
It
I hate
happens.
when that happens.
It happened to me last night on the show. Like you just got to start talking, and then hopefully it comes back.
Yeah. I had COVID October of last year. I had it for like 5 weeks, and I
sorry to
had
hear
it so bad that I thought I wasn't going to survive. I didn't get the shot, but I did get some antibodies to help me fight it off and get better. But it took like a good 6-7 weeks. But after that, I lost my smell, my taste. I got my taste back. I got part of my smell back. But one of the issues I have now, like if I smell a banana, it don't smell like a banana anymore. If I smell alcohol, it don't smell like alcohol. It stinks. So, and I was left with some brain fog here and there, and just comes and goes. And can't say I'm glad it's gone, because who knows? It may hit us again. Who knows? It may not. But so go ahead and make a topic.
So like I was saying, my next series of presentations, and like I said, if at any time you remember what you were going to ask me, feel free to interrupt me and say, this is what I want to ask you. I would love to hear it. My next round of presentations will be about UFOs and abduction cases. I want to see if I can find some people though to talk to about it. Because a lot of people are very, very, I don't want to say afraid, but they want to kind of keep it to themselves. Because I don't want to say scared. Scared is not the right word I want to use here. But they want to keep these kinds of things themselves. And I can't blame them. You get ridiculed for coming forward and saying, yeah, I was taken in a spaceship. I was taken in a spaceship and things were done. And I was, because you have some very interesting cases. You have the man out of Brazil who says that he impregnated an alien. You have Barney and Betty Hill. They were abducted. You have Travis Walton, Whitley Strieber, all these people that were abducted. But I would like to get some people who aren't as well known and to talk about it, because it fascinates me. I've been fascinated with UFOs for a very long time, aliens as a whole, and I have my own theory that maybe we're the aliens. If you look at Mars has a series of pockmarks from asteroids, but it has a scar on it too. And I think that this is all theory. I can in no way prove this, so I don't want anybody coming in there like, well, you said, and it's gotten no. I believe Mars was once inhabited, whether it be from us or whether it be from some form of ancestor that we all have. And then what happened was they rose too high in civilization, or they couldn't protect their planet from whatever was happening. They couldn't shield it in the right way, so they had to leave. And so they terraform Earth, then they come to Earth, and then they have a whole population. But then what we did is we sent out different emissaries from Mars to these other planets to see if they were habitable. And maybe what we have coming back now are different species that maybe found us, got rid of us, used our technology, came here, this, that, and third, whatever. And that are telling us, hey, this planet is habitable. This other planet is habitable. That sort of thing. Because to me, I don't think we've ever stopped going to space. I don't think we've once ever stopped. I think we've been going. I just don't think it's in this large capacity of rockets that everybody thinks. Everybody thinks that these giant space launches, that they have to have those to go to space, when you really don't need that. And if you are in advanced technology, you know how to harness different concepts and ideas of gravity, you wouldn't need a giant rocket. You need something the size of a ship that can hold the pressure from leaving the atmosphere, coming back to the atmosphere. They have space stations out there, and who knows what they're working on. They show a glimpse. And a lot of people like to say, NASA, never a straight answer, and maybe that's the case. But to sit here and think that we have just stopped going to space entirely, I just don't see it. And I don't. The one thing I think that irks me above all things, well, two. One is flat Earth. I'm sorry, I will never buy into the concept that the Earth is flat. I can't. I've flown in a plane. When you fly in a plane, you can literally see the curvature of the Earth. So I don't buy into it. If people do, that's their business. But I think it's one of the more outlandish theories. And then the second is that we didn't go to space. I don't buy that either. I believe we've been to space. We've been to space multiple times. Here's the reason why I don't believe in that second one, because the Dogon people of Africa, a tribe in Africa, knew about Sirius B, that whole area. How did they know about it? Right? This is a tribe that knew about this location in space before we went to the moon, before the United States was even a country. Their ancestors knew about that. How? How do all of these other cultures that predate our nation as a whole know about space and beings from outer space, but yet we never went to space? That doesn't make any sense. Look at the Nazca Lines, for instance. The Nazca Lines, one of my favorite locations. You'd have to be in a hot air balloon to see the images that these people drew. What did they draw those for? You would have to have mapped this out in a way, because the ant, it looks just like an ant, right? They're beautiful. It fascinates me. And to hear people say, I don't think we've ever been to space, I'm just like, do you not know history? Do you not know that ancient civilizations knew about people that were out in the stars and claimed that? And, the Dogon people knew where Sirius B was. It's not like they just said, yeah, people from up there. They said, no, there is a place over here. And then scientists later confirmed that it was Sirius B that they that they were talking about. How would you know that? So I just think it's foolish, and I don't think it does anybody any favors. You disrespect the astronauts that went up in the Challenger when the Challenger exploded, and I remember that day. I was young. I was a kid when that happened, and one of my teachers knew Judith. I think she was related to her by blood, cousin, I think, or it was something along the lines of that, and it just, I don't know, as much science fiction is out there and as much as we have, as much fascination as people have with space, I'm one of those people. I would love to go to space. That would fascinate me to no end, just to travel out, because not too many people can say they've left the planet, literally left the planet to go out. And I think we've traversed. I don't for 1 second believe the whole concept that we haven't. And that's going to be my next series of presentations, is going to be on UFOs and abductions and space as a whole, because it's an area that doesn't get hit as much, because, a lot of people like to talk about Bigfoot. They like to talk about, ghosts and spirits and things like that. But I don't think there's enough out there regarding abductions or regarding the UFOs in that regard. I think there's plenty of UFO information out there, sure, crafts and what the creatures look like and events and things like that. But in terms of abductions or meetings with aliens, we forget that, Eisenhower supposedly met with aliens. Truman was part of Majestic 12. That whole thing that happened, I think that the one thing that I have noticed in different reports and different things about UFOs is, if you look at reports from before the atomic bomb, when they really started testing these nuclear devices, there weren't as many. There were few and far between. Yes, you have even ancient times, people report seeing UFOs and light in space. But then you have the atomic bomb. You have the tests in Bikini Atoll, and you have the tests out in the desert. And now all of a sudden there's a slew of UFO sightings. There's a slew of them. People are seeing them right and left. Why? What did that alert? What did that do? You have a lot of cryptid sightings that happened after that too. We remember the Mothman came after that. The Mothman, even a little bit long, a little bit later than the atomic bomb droppings. But I think the atomic bomb set something off, or set something in motion, or maybe shifted us into a different dimension. Supposedly the turning on of the Hadron Collider in, I believe it was 2012, shifted us into a different reality. You have Mandela effect and everything else of that nature. But if you look at the sightings that were seen before the atomic blast, and then you look at the sightings that were seen after, they've increased. So when we did that, I think we alerted something, someone. We did something, because human beings are always doing something. Whether that's a good or a bad something is left to interpretation. But I think that atomic bomb blast, especially, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, then you had ones that were detonated in different parts of the world that were 10 times the size of that. You either awoke something or you alerted something, because since then, because if you notice the science fiction, because science fiction isn't something that just happened in the 50s, 40s. They had science fiction stories in, way back. We're talking ancient times. They had science fiction stories, right? But you have a slew of new science fiction. We're talking ray guns. We're talking, the Little Green Men. We're talking the Twilight Zone. We're talking Outer Limits. All of those things, 40s, 50s, and from there, and I love it. I love all the old science fiction stuff. I'm a big, science fiction fan. Really enjoy the Twilight Zone. Really enjoy science fiction as a whole. But if you look and you read reports from before the atomic blast or the atomic testing to after, it increases. The number of reports of UFOs, sightings, cryptid sightings, things like that increased exponentially.
Right. A name I wanted to give you, you may have heard of it. His name is Stan Gordon.
Let me make sure it's the same person, because I believe it is.
He's in the PA area.
Yeah, I met Stan actually in Butler County. He was at the Butler County Paranormal Conference. I met Stan. Didn't get to talk to him for very long, but I met him. So I know who he is, yes.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting.
Yes.
He does a lot of stuff about mostly UFOs, but Bigfoot, cryptids, and
Yeah.
stuff like that. He's got a lot of good books out. Do you have any books out?
I'm working on one as we speak. I am getting
So
the
am I.
bare bones because I've had people say, well, you should write a book. As much knowledge as you know, and that's not me
Yes.
hype my own ego out, but as much as I know, I think it's time for me to start putting pen to paper, and really putting something together, because I have a lot of things I would like to leave to people. Because the one thing I love about presenting, the one thing I love about talking to people is I don't want to say teaching because that sounds a little egotistical. I love giving information to folks that might not have known something, and then them repeating and giving me back information I didn't know. The lady at the Butler Paranormal Conference telling me about McKees Rock, somebody that knows the area. I appreciate that because I don't know the area. I barely know my own area. I know certain parts and locations in my area, and then I can take people to. But yeah, that's the goal for this year, is to write a book. That's the goal.
To write a book. Yeah. I have a few books that I'm writing.
Okay.
One on the shelf, and two I'm currently working on. So I'm hoping to have it out like the beginning of the year.
Well, listen, when you
But-
get that out, let us know. We'll have you on like a week before you release it. Give us a place where we can find it, and we'll make sure that our audience looks for your book and hopefully purchases your book. And I would definitely love to purchase a copy off of you myself. Make sure you autograph it so that
Thank you.
so I can take it on Antiques Roadshow in about 5 years and sell it for about $20 million.
There you go.
There it is.
Yeah, and I'm definitely going to keep you in mind for my friend John and I are working on putting together a conference, which is going to be about UFOs, ghosts, Bigfoot,
Please.
and other topics. So I'm going to keep you in mind and have you as a guest speaker.
Thank you. I love doing it. Anybody else that wants to have me at their event, please let me know.
And what area are you in? What
I am
state?
in northeastern Ohio, so the Akron, Ohio area, because I can tell everybody where I'm from and all that, and then it just Akron is the best way to put it. Like, that's because everybody knows Akron from LeBron James, so they would know that area, and then so that area. I'm from that area, Summit County. That's the best way.
So you're closer to Pittsburgh.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And
Okay.
I'm
Because I'm like 5 hours from there. We haven't really decided where exactly we're going to hold this conference. We may hold it closer to Pittsburgh,
Okay.
than down this way.
I want
I'm
to
in
do.
the-
I want
Go
to do
ahead.
something similar for Ohio, because like there's not a lot of things that go on in Ohio that I know of yet. I know Gretchen Fest is happening, and so big ups to all the people involved in that. But I want something here too. I want to have something here because I want to be able to travel here because I go
Right.
I go to Pennsylvania, and then I go to West Virginia for Les Odell's WVK. So I speak there as well. So just and if I could do something in Ohio, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. So, I got some friends up in Ohio. I also have family property, 800 acres in West Virginia.
Nice.
And there's been a number of Bigfoot sightings, and one of my cousins had a dog man experience. So eventually I'm going to probably do something up in West Virginia too. Now, West Virginia from here is about 7 hours.
Oof.
Not sure how far that would be from you.
So, where at in West Virginia exactly?
Calhoun County, Orma.
So we're probably looking like 3-4 hours. It's not too bad because the Flatwoods monster incident that happened in Flatwoods, West Virginia.
Mhm.
I have family members that witnessed that. Kathleen May, Eugene Lemon. I'm related to them.
Okay.
And Freddie just passed actually a few days ago, I believe. So rest
Sorry
in
to
peace
hear
to
that.
him. Yeah, I didn't really know him. Like, these are distant relatives that I have never
Right.
met in my entire life. But it's still cool to be able to tie myself to that, that whole situation. But that's about three, if I'm if I'm not doing the speed limit, that sits roughly about 3 hours and maybe 50 minutes. So it's not
Yeah.
too bad. It's not too bad. And like I said, if it's worthwhile enough and helps me learn and helps grow what I'm trying to do, I will always make time to go somewhere and see these things. Because I would love to talk to your cousin about the Dogman experience, because I've heard different Dogman experience encounters. None of them good. I've never heard one story where the Dogman has been a friendly being. I've always heard there's two theories regarding it. One is it's a skinwalker, which, a lot of people are afraid to mention because they're afraid, of what happens. And the second one being that it's just a werewolf type of creature, that it's a being of some form, but it's always been menacing. I've never once been like, yeah, the dog man showed up and gave me some tea and we sat and talked and I asked how his cousin was and we hung out for a few hours and I went home. No, it's always, I was terrified for my life.
Yeah. What was I going to say? Brain fog again. How about that?
It happens.
God. Yeah. So we're coming up on. We got about 9 minutes left. So for the listeners, most of my people will rewatch this. How can they get a hold of you? How can they contact you?
You can find me over at my YouTube, first of all, at www.youtube.com/@ this Uncanny Earth, as the ticker shows beneath me here. It shows that. Also, you can find me on Facebook, Robert Solomon. Feel free to add me. Feel free to send me any experience that you have regarding anything of the paranormal. I'm always looking to learn new things, so please, by all means, send me that information. Also, you can find me on Instagram at Robert the Mothy Priest Solomon. I also voice act. I was in Boston voice acting for a good friend of mine, Kenny Vigu, for his podcast for Fallout, the video game for Fallout 76. I acted in front of Bethesda on a stage. You can find that on YouTube too. So I've done that. You can find me at, that's pretty much where you can find me. If you have anything you want to send me in terms of documentation or your own story or your own experience, by all means, send it to thisuncanny@gmail.com. Feel free to send me your experiences. And what I would like to do is take some of these experiences, put that into the book, and just kind of get that out there. Otherwise, if you see me at any convention, you want to come up, say hello, feel free to. I never shy away from folks. I never treat people like they're pariahs. I always like to talk to people. I will sit and talk to you as long as I can, unless I have to work the next day, because I have to be up at like 5 a.m. sometimes. So sometimes I'm a little tired, but I will never be mean or rude to folks that just want to have a conversation. I stayed a little bit later for both the Fayette County and the Butler Paranormal. People would come up and ask me questions about giants and biblical stuff. So I welcome anyone that wants to talk about it. So please feel free to get at me. Also, if you would like to have me on your show, please, once again, or your conference, just give me a holler at thisuncanny@gmail.com. And thank you, Dave. I appreciate you. I'm glad this 2 hours went by way too fast, as these things always seem to do when I have interesting folks to conversate with. So I 100% appreciate you. Thank you.
Well, I'd love to have you back, and I thank you for being a guest this morning. And stay in touch. I look forward to meeting
Please,
you. And,
please. Yes.
Buying your book and
Thank you.
reading your book. Yeah. So, anything else?
Like I said, I just want to thank you for having me on. It has been a pleasure. This is the best 2 hours I could have spent on a Saturday. Because when I get off, I have to go do normal adult things that we all have to do, which sucks, but it's life, right? But other than that, thank you. Thank everybody who listened today. I really appreciate each and every one of you. Without all of you, I wouldn't be here. So I'm always 100% appreciative for everybody that comes to the conferences. Listen, even if you come to the conference, you hear what I say for 10 minutes and you don't like it and you leave, at least you were there for 10 minutes. And I appreciate that. I appreciate everybody who's ever shown me love, who's ever listened to the podcast, supported the Patreon, did all of this for me, who supports this, because I also stream. You can check me out at Uncanny Alchemist on Twitch. I'm streaming Diablo 4, so by all means, come through, hang out. But I'm just thankful for everybody that I've crossed paths with, whether we got along or not, because you're not going to get along with everybody in life in general. In this field, especially, you're not going to get along with everybody, but I wish nobody ill will. I have love for everybody. So thank you to everybody. Thank you. I'm very humble about what I do, and I love doing it. So thank you to everybody. Thank you to Dave. I love being on people's shows and talk, because it's a nice change of pace. I don't have to be the one doing all the show work. I can, just relax and get the questions bombarded to me, which is I'm very appreciative for, because anybody that does a podcast, it's always nice to be a guest. And I would like to extend an invitation for you to come on our podcast, and we'll work out some dates and times. And if you can't, I'm always flexible on dates and times. So my co-host isn't as flexible as I am, so you might just get me instead of him. But that happens. We've had that happen before, and it's just part of doing the podcasting thing. So once again, thank you, and thank you to your audience for listening.
Robert, thank you again for being my guest, and you take care.
Thank you, sir.
And stay in touch.
Definitely.
And I'll send you an email.
Please.
I always do after the show. So
please.
Once again, thank you very much for being a guest this morning, and I'll talk with you soon.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you having me.
Thank you.
From the Northwest to the Everglades, from the Southwest up to Maine. Even though he's seldom seen, everybody knows his name. Through the forests and the backwoods, folks are looking night and day, hoping for a chance to see old Bigfoot USA. Well, he's big, bad, and hairy, hangs out in the woods. No doubt he'd be scary in any neighborhood. He's the best there is at staying hid, but we're gonna find him anyway. Maybe then we can document old Bigfoot USA. He leaves tracks, scat, man, if that ain't evidence, how about hair? Banging on trees and midnight screams don't sound like no bear. Got an appetite, keeps him up all night, so he likes to chill all day. But he'll be around when the sun goes down. He's Bigfoot USA. Man ever been that fast, no man will ever be that strong. Ain't no way you're gonna whip his, so you might as well get along. He's got more names than anyone in any record book, they say. Right or wrong, they all belong to old Bigfoot USA. They call him Bigfoot, wild man, Sasquatch, stick man, cattle critter, woolly booger, mossy man, and flint man. Rush ape, skunk ape, night ape, swamp ape, grass man, wood man, gray man, and hairy man. Dog man, otter man, lizard man, raggedy man, Wendigo, Seattle, Sonoqua, bush man. Wood devil, mountain devil, goat man, stone man, forest devil, big man, timber giant, brush man, ice giant, devil, monkey, boogie man, and cave monster, yellow top, skookum, and nook nook. Swamp monster, night screamer, evil seeker, catamount, Fort Worth monster, Minnesota Iceman. Stone coat, missing link, ape man, char man, big figure, stone giant, Missouri monster.